South Korea's terror alert level has been raised from stage 1 attention to stage 2 caution as of today, ahead of its hosting of global leaders and business heavyweights under the APEC agenda next week. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, October 24th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Final preparations are well underway ahead of South Korea's hosting of global leaders and industry insiders attending the APEC gatherings in Gyeongju next week. For more on this, I have freelance journalist Yang Chien-Hao from Taiwan here in the studio. Chien-Hao, welcome back.
Hello, glad to be here.
I also have Chloe Borgnon with French broadcaster France 24 with us. Chloe, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Chien-Hao, we shall start with you. So let's begin with some background information about the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, including, of course, its role and relevance.
Yeah, so back in 1980s, we know that it's still the period of Cold War, like the United States and the Soviet Union are still like counting with each other. And China was starting its economic reformation and opened up itself. And also many countries are indeed beginning to seek for new ways to divide it up economic activity, so that deepened the economic interdependence and sped up the globalization. And during that time, Australia, it was the very first country to propose the concept of APEC in 1989, starting with ministerial meetings, and by 1993 it had evolved into a informal leaders meeting. And today there are already 21 countries and regions around the Pacific, all joining under the label of economic entities, including Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China, and other like United States, Canada, other countries. Every year, these leaders, they take APEC as a chance or platform to discuss free trade, easing trade restrictions, and cross-border cooperation. And together, these 21 economies represent 60% of the global GDP and about a half of total world trade. So the scale is quite large and significant. And when we talk about trade, we often hear about WTO, the World Trade Organization, and APEC. At WTO, it deals directly with the tariff problems and trade barriers, and its agreements are binding, and they take effect once approved by member countries' legislators or signed by their leaders with strict monitoring mechanisms. But APEC, on the other hand, it is non-binding. It is more like a forum where business leaders and national leaders meet, talk, and exchange ideas and look up for opportunities to cooperate and helping to promote multilateral trade. But because national leaders usually make appearances and meeting together at APEC summits, and increasingly trade issues have become politicized, the spotlight is intense. Since President Trump, as all of us know, that after he took office this time, and he launched trade wars, like countries like United States, China, and Russia. These superpowers are all the members of APEC. So this definitely have drawn even more attention. So media and analysis are watching closely to see what issues these major powers, leaders will raise during APEC and what positions they will take and how they will have interactions on the global stage.
Right. Now, Chloe, we have quite a number of multilateral frameworks across the world, of course. What makes APEC different, and why are some pundits saying that the meeting this particular year matters even more?
Yeah, so to start with why it would matter, the idea this year for the agenda, the main theme is building a sustainable tomorrow. So APEC 2025 in Gyeongju is focusing on three key priorities according to the South Korean organizers. So we want to connect, to innovate, and to prosper. So some experts from the National Center for APEC Studies has been explaining that it will also be this year a way for South Korea to showcase its paradigm of leading the way. So that's the new paradigm that's been developed here for the diplomacy in South Korea. And there is also the idea that right now we are in a world, as Chien-Hao was mentioning, of polar crisis, so multiple crises happening all at the same time everywhere. So the idea will be that through APEC and through especially the Leaders Summit, that is the main event of the whole APEC that's been lasting quite a while, and I will still keep on going after. The idea would be to do three things: reshaping global supply chain and the rise of protectionism that we've seen through the tariff war of Donald Trump. But even before that, we've already been speaking here in the studio about all South Korea has to do to try to get more supply chains and try to protect itself. They will also be speaking about accelerating the digital transformation that's happening at the moment with AI especially, and then exchange and discussion on the problem with demographic changes that most of the countries are experiencing together. We know that most of the South Korean neighbors are also experimenting kind of the same demographic changes, so it will be a good way to share the experience and try to work together towards making sure that those changes are getting as smooth as possible. Then what's making APEC so different from most of the framework? Chien-Hao has been touching on it quite a lot, so I mean, I'm just going to come back a little bit to it, but yeah, I think the main point that you've been mentioning is it's important to see that it's volunteer and non-binding commitment, and the whole idea is not to make constraints, but to have a platform of dialogue for all of the countries, because they were wanting to escape the Cold War mechanism where you have like main countries that are deciding for everyone. So the whole idea is really to be able to get a consensus on decision and try to make everyone be able to be a part of the decision so that all the countries have the same voice and can share their position on this specific platform.
Right, and speaking about sharing voices, Chien-Hao, during one of our earlier panel sessions, you touched upon the importance of APEC for Taiwan.
Right.
Could you remind us about that importance and, of course, also about Taiwan's agenda at this year's annual gathering?
Okay, as I mentioned several weeks before, that Taiwan is one of the very rare few international institution or organization which Taiwan is able to take part, and also Taiwanese representatives or like government like leaders will always take this opportunity to have interactions with world leaders during APEC. And this year, Taiwan is trying to emphasize three main topics in APEC. First, we want to highlight the importance of industrial autonomy and economic security, which is very easy to know because, you know, we're just a small island and we are facing the threat from China. So we need to have something to protect ourselves. And second, it's Taiwan is moving from being a country focused on manufacturing to now one center on innovation. And it is also looking for economic partners who share similar values and can complement one another. And the third one, Taiwan hopes to promote, Chloe has also mentioned, AI development that puts people at the center. A message that actually echoes the South Korean government recent focus on AI. And in addition, since many world leaders will hold meetings during APEC, including President Trump and President Xi's summit, there is a lot of attention from Taiwan, whether the joint statements might mention Taiwan or not. Another sensitive issue is that the United States has also imposing tariffs on Taiwan too, and sparking some frustration among Taiwanese people toward President Trump. And for the pro-United States, the administration in Taiwan, handling this situation will become a very difficult challenge, including balancing the relationship with Washington, addressing what President Lai himself may see as unreasonable demand from President Trump, and also at the same time he needs to respond to public sentiment in Taiwan. And even though APEC's main goal is to promote free trade, right? Geopolitics inevitably come into play, especially for Taiwan, which faces growing pressure and threats from China. And now, with President Trump back into office this year, a very unconventional president, Washington is pushing more demands on Taiwan in Taipei, from asking TSMC to have more investments in the United States, also pushing Taiwan to raise the defense spending, framing this as returns for Americans' protection of Taiwan. That's made trade and politics more closely intertwined than ever, and now there's growing concerns in Taiwan over whether President Trump, after meeting with President Xi, might make concessions to Beijing authority. For instance, he might be publicly declaring opposition to Taiwan independence, and that's something both analysts and media will watch very closely in the coming days.
Right, and speaking about that, Chloe, so as Chien-Hao has just mentioned, there is much media attention on the planned talks between President Trump and his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping. What's the latest on that front?
So we've got very fresh news because the latest arrived this morning, actually. So the National Security Advisor from South Korea has been saying that both President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping will come to do a state visit to South Korea during the APEC time, which is, we were kind of expecting it, but it's good to have the final official confirmation because for a few weeks now, it was not sure if both of them will be in the country together. It is happening, and we also had an announcement last night for us in Korea from the White House saying that both of them are going to meet in person in a side meeting in Gyeongju next Thursday morning. So that would be October 30th. October 30th. Donald Trump is doing that meeting with Xi Jinping right before going back to the United States. So he will be skipping the Leaders Summit at the APEC. And what are they going to talk about? We can expect that they're probably going to be speaking about the tariff discussions that have been growing. Like the tension is still very strong between the two countries. We remember when the United States decided that the tariffs were to be imposed on China, China answered with higher tariff for the US that also put another level of tariffs. It's been going a bit down now, but it's still, we can still feel that the tension is here, and it's between two of the biggest economies in the world, so it's important that they have discussion and they are able to discuss. Will the discussion go smoothly? That's a question we might have to ask, because when asked about what he will be asking, Donald Trump said that the top question will be about fentanyl, so the drug that's currently in the US, and he said that he will ask his Chinese counterpart, President Xi Jinping, about the fentanyl problem. So I feel like this is a discussion that if we can get some information about it later on, I'm not sure about what they really are going to speak about, because there are quite a lot of subjects that have to be discussed between the two leaders.
Right, so many questions, so few answers. All we know for now is that the summit itself is going to be taking place on the 30th of October, that is next Thursday. Chien-Hao, based on what has been shared about President Trump's agenda, it appears that he may skip the main APEC event. What has been said about the reasons behind his decision to perhaps skip this particular event?
Indeed, many journalists are thinking so. Indeed, there was a growing talk in the media till last night that President Trump will only stay in South Korea for only half of a day on November 29th, mainly to attend the APEC Business Summit. So far, some big names we know have confirmed their attendance, including the Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, and Sam Altman, the OpenAI founder, along with other top global business leaders. And after that, President Trump is expected to hold separate one-on-one meetings with President Xi Jinping and then with President Lee Jae-myung before wrapping up his visit. So many people are assuming that it looks unlikely that President Trump will take part in the APEC opening ceremony, which is going to be held on October 31st, and also the Leaders Summit on November 1st. And just several hours ago, White House has announced the schedule, like President Trump is going to stay in Gyeongju for 1 night and 2 days, so meeting President Xi and President Lee, but it didn't mention anything about opening ceremony or the Leaders Summit. Still, if he skips the Leaders Summit on November 1st, I'm not surprised, because President Trump he's been doubling down on his America First message. We have talked about this before, pushing other countries to make concessions or negotiations to the United States, and he's never been a fan of free trade or multilateralism. In fact, President Trump's current stance and political message run counter to the spirit of APEC itself. That's why many observers believe that he will focus mainly on bilateral meetings, one-on-one, including instead of one-to-many, and particularly with only like hosting nation, South Korea, and then China, the superpower. And when it comes to whether he and President Xi can actually reach any concrete results, there are still a lot of skepticism in the media.
Right. Now, understandably, Chloe, some U.S. lawmakers have voiced concern over Mr. Trump's reluctance to attend multilateral regional summits. Granted, he is going to be attending the ASEAN-related meetings in Malaysia, but the one here, the main event here in South Korea remains unclear. Could you tell us a bit more about the concerns shared by American lawmakers?
Yes, so they made a letter to President Donald Trump, the U.S. lawmakers. Interesting to note that it was bipartisan, so both Republican and Democrats have been sharing together some concern, which is showing how important it actually is as an issue for them. They were actually asking the president to personally attend 3 of the major Indo-Pacific summits. So, as you were saying, the East Asia Summit in Malaysia, that he's supposed to be going to. Then they wanted him to go to APEC in South Korea. And they were also asking for his participation in the Quad Leaders Summit in India. So, their idea is that his participation in the summits would be a very powerful response to China and to Beijing diplomatic campaign in the region, because we know that China has been growing stronger and stronger there by the diplomatic game, winning more and more support from the countries around them. So what they're saying is being there and showing that the United States are still a strong ally to reckon on will be important, and also discussion and being part of this meeting will be a way also to get allies against China on security threats in the area. They have been naming I'm quoting them directly, the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait as the main diplomatic concerns for the United States in the area. It's true that Trump's position is still America first, and we know that he has been downplaying the need for the US to be playing any role anywhere else, because he's saying that the world needs the US more than the United States need the world. In my opinion, I would say, just like Chien-Hao, I'm not surprised about this position from him, and I'm not surprised that he's choosing to kind of avoid the multilateral position. We've seen it already with the G7, for example, in Canada when he left a bit earlier as well. I think that for him, meeting on one-on-one meetings is most important. And we see it also in all his planning, because he's going to visit quite a few countries before coming to South Korea, and he will be meeting with Japan Prime Minister. He's going to be meeting here in Korea with the President Lee Jae-myung. So in a way, he's still showing up and doing his diplomacy, but his way is not multilateral, is one-on-one meeting, trying to get probably the best deals and trying to implement his tariffs, especially with every country one by one.
Right, seeking a transactional approach to issues of interest. Chien-Hao, back to the APEC Leaders Meeting scheduled to take place in Gyeongju next week. What perhaps looks to determine the success of this particular event for South Korea?
There are a few noteworthy points ahead, including President Trump's meeting with President Xi, and whether North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will meet President Trump and even President Lee Jae-myung during the APEC. If either of this happens and have concrete result, for example, making agreements on certain things, it would likely be considered a success by outside observers. But however, setting that aside, I think journalists and participants will judge it by another standard, whether the preparations of Gyeongju APEC meeting can meet the needs of attendees and for the journalists, because South Korea, indeed, this country has plenty of experiences hosting international events, like, for example, the 1988 Seoul Olympic Games and then 2002 World Cup. These two cases are always being cited as very successful examples. But during my 13 years covering news here in Korea, I've also seen things that didn't go so well. For example, one of the example is 2014 ancient Asian Games, which draw a far amount of criticism. because Incheon, it had long focused on real estate and land development. But after the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008, the global financial crisis that has hit Incheon very hard, and property prices fell more than half, and many new apartments were left unsold. And as a result, the city's financial situation suffered, making it unable to prepare well for the games. So when I visited Incheon just days before the games, I saw that even like road signs and venue directions were not even prepare well, so causing confusions for foreign tourists, visitors, and athletes alike. And once the games started, even bigger issues emerged, like shuttle buses. The schedules between the athletes' village and the competition venue were suddenly changed without any announcements, which triggers big trouble, making that the frequent delays disrupt the athletes and training and matches. Also, like interpreters, translators, their budgets are being reduced. So many of them, they left before the games, before the game ended, creating like serious communicating problems between athletes and reporters on site. So to make matters worse, instead of highlighting the athletes, the organization brought numerous K-pop idol performances, shifting the focus away from the sports itself. So in the end, that has triggered so many criticized. So you can see like efficient transport and reliable language services, and also solid crisis management are just as essential. This is very important. I think it has become a very important lesson for South Korea, and I hope they have learned well through the experience since.
Right. Well, with regard to the APEC event, this is, of course, Seoul's, South Korea's second hosting of the event, following the event back in Busan in the year 2005. Chloe, what do you suppose are some of the other stories that the international media may be interested in during this year's APEC meeting here in South Korea?
Yeah, so as we've been touching it upon, so I know that I guess the media are going to be interested obviously in the bilateral summits. So everything that will be related to the agenda of Donald Trump, I would say, but also, I mean, we know that there will be bilateral summits between South Korea and China, South Korea and Japan, and again, seeing the way the current situation is in the area, it's going to be interesting to follow and see what they can do and what this meeting will develop into in the end. It's a good thing also to have China back in the diplomatic stage with the other neighboring countries, because we know that in the recent time they've also been getting closer to North Korea, so it's good to have this diplomatic stage opening again. So that's something everyone's going to be interested in it. The APEC summit itself, again, I think there will be a lot of issues that are going to be discussed. I'm not sure if they will bear visible results in just a few days and meetings. We'll see, but I do feel like there might be some fruits and some things happening in months to come thanks to the APEC summit. And that will also be a good way to see through that dialogue platform that's happening there, where leaders can discuss, come together and, resolve problems together.
Right. Hopefully the APEC will provide a stepping stone then to productive interaction in the future as well. All right, Chloe, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you.
Min Sunhee, with regard to your concerns, hopefully APEC has translators and transportation in place for next week's event. All right. Thank you for your thoughts. Right, that ends this week's editions of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and see you back here same time next Monday.